Hi, everyone, and welcome to Speak Up. If you're joining us for the first time, we're so glad you're here. And if you've been listening for a while, thank you for coming back. It really means a lot. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe. It's a simple way to help this podcast reach more people like you who care about growing and improving.
Today, we're getting straight to something we all face, wasting time. That feeling of looking back at the day and wondering where the hours went. It's frustrating and sometimes even heavy. But this conversation isn't about guilt. It's about learning how to see time differently and gently take back the moments that matter.
And that's why this episode is worth listening to. Because when we stop losing time to distraction or hesitation, we open up space for the things that really matter. Our goals, our relationships, and our peace of mind. Just a few small shifts can change the way you live your day.
So if you've ever felt like time is slipping through your fingers, stay with us. In the next half hour, we'll share simple, practical ways to stop wasting time and start living it with more care.
Let's get started. You know, it's strange how hours can slip away almost silently. You don't even notice it happening at first. Maybe you sit down to do one small thing. Check a message, scroll for a minute, or put something off because you'll get to it later. And then suddenly, the light outside has changed, half the day is gone, and you're left with this heavy sigh, that quiet moment when you think, what did I even do today? I think that feeling hits harder than we realize because it's not just about the minutes we lost. It's about the opportunities we didn't step into. And in those moments, it's almost like time itself disappeared without asking our permission.
Yes, and I think what makes it hurt is how ordinary those moments feel while they're happening. It's rarely one big choice, it's the tiny ones. Choosing to wait 5 more minutes before starting, clicking on something we don't really care about, but it distracts us just enough. Or even just sitting there, frozen, because starting feels harder than delaying. And when we finally notice, it's almost too late. There's this little pang of guilt, like, I could have done so much more. And that guilt doesn't just fade. It lingers in the background, shaping how we see ourselves, as if losing time means we're somehow falling behind in life.
That's so true. And I think that guilt is part of what makes it heavy. Because it's not only about the lost hours, it's also about the stories we tell ourselves afterward. That quiet inner voice saying, why didn't you just start earlier? Why can't you stay focused? And the more we listen to that voice, the worse it feels, until the day feels wasted entirely. It's like we're standing in front of a mirror, not just watching the clock tick, but watching our energy drain. And it hurts because deep down we know time is something we can never get back. That realization, it stings.
Exactly. And the sting isn't only about productivity, it's emotional. It's looking back at the day and realizing that the moments we lost could have been moments for rest, for connection, or for something meaningful. Even when we're not doing anything wrong, the emptiness of lost time feels heavier than if we had simply chosen to do nothing with intention. There's such a difference between resting on purpose and drifting without noticing. And when it's drifting, the weight comes afterward, that quiet regret that whispers, you missed it.
And I think that's why it feels almost invisible while it's happening, because drifting is comfortable. Distraction feels light in the moment. It doesn't ask anything of us. But it's afterward, when the day is behind us, that we start to feel the real weight. That slow exhale, that tightness in the chest, realizing time has been lost. And it makes you wonder, how many days have I let slip away like this? It's a sobering thought because the more we notice it, the more we see how often it happens. It's like sand falling through our fingers, and suddenly we realize our hands have been open the whole time.
And that image, the sand slipping through our fingers, is exactly what it feels like. We think we have endless hours, endless chances, but then reality taps us on the shoulder and shows us how quickly they vanish. And the truth is, once a day has passed, it's gone. We can't rewind it. We can't relive it. And maybe that's why these quiet disappearances of hours matter so much, because they remind us that time is fragile. That's what makes this conversation important. It's not about being perfect or squeezing every second, but about seeing the hours clearly before they slip away unnoticed again.
You know, one of the most dangerous thoughts we all fall into is, I'll do it later. It sounds harmless at the moment, almost comforting, like time is this endless resource we can just borrow from tomorrow. But the truth is, later rarely comes the way we imagine it will. What happens instead is this cycle of postponing. We push things forward again and again, and before we know it, weeks or even months have disappeared. And the strange thing is, while we're waiting for the perfect time, life doesn't pause for us. The clock keeps moving, and that's the part that's so unsettling.
Yes, and I think that's what makes it tricky, because I'll do it later feels safe. It feels like a promise we're making to ourselves, so we don't feel like we're failing in the present. But in reality, it's just a delay dressed up as hope. And every time we repeat it, the gap between what we want and what we're actually doing gets wider. That gap can feel heavy, like carrying around unfinished business that never really leaves your mind. It's almost like we're living in waiting mode, always preparing, but never stepping into the actual moment.
And the weight of that waiting builds up quietly. You tell yourself you'll start later today, then tomorrow, and eventually, later becomes this endless hallway with no door at the end. What's worse is that it gives us this false sense of control, as if time belongs to us and we can just rearrange it however we like. But time doesn't work that way. It moves forward whether we're ready or not. And realizing that can be a little shocking, because it forces us to ask, how many times have I told myself later only to never return?
And what makes it even more painful is how often later is tied to things that matter deeply. It's not just chores or small tasks. It's calling someone we love, starting that dream we've been carrying, or simply giving ourselves permission to rest. We think there will always be a better moment to clear space, the right energy, but that perfect moment never really arrives. And when we look back, it's not the things we did that haunt us most, but the things we kept postponing until the chance to do them quietly slipped away.
And that's where the illusion of more time becomes almost cruel, because it tells us we can afford to wait, when in truth, every pause is a trade. We're trading the present for a future we can't guarantee. And if we're honest, that's a risky deal. There's something sobering about recognizing that each "I'll do it later" is actually a decision to not do it now. And sometimes, not ever. It's not about scaring ourselves, but about seeing clearly. Time doesn't wait, no matter how convincing the illusion feels.
And maybe that's why this part of the conversation matters so much. Because once we really see through the illusion, we begin to notice how precious the present moment is. The truth is, the hours we keep pushing forward are the very hours we need most. When we realize that later isn't guaranteed, it shifts everything. It's uncomfortable, yes, but it's also freeing, because it reminds us that the only time we ever really have is now. And that simple truth can change how we move through the day.
You know, something I've been realizing is that it's not really about how many hours we have in a day. We all get the same 24. What makes the difference is how alive and intentional we feel in those hours. Because two people can spend the same amount of time on something, but the results and the way they feel afterward can be completely different. And I think that's because of energy. If we're drained, distracted, or only half present, even 3 hours can feel empty. But if we're focused, calm, and really there, even 30 minutes can feel powerful.
Yes, and I love that shift, because so often we obsess over minutes and schedules as if adding more time will automatically solve everything. But it doesn't. We've all had days where we technically had the hours, but still felt like nothing meaningful came out of them. That emptiness isn't about time at all. It's about energy. When our minds are scattered or our hearts are somewhere else, no amount of minutes can make it feel full. But when we give our attention with care, even a short stretch of time can feel rich, almost like it expands beyond the clock.
Exactly. And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck. They try to squeeze more hours out of the day instead of asking, where is my energy actually going? Because energy leaks in small ways. Endless scrolling, saying yes to things that don't matter, overthinking until you're exhausted before you even start. Those drains are invisible until you notice them. And once you do, it's like flipping a light on. You realize it's not about working harder or longer. It's about protecting your energy so the hours you already have actually mean something.
That's such an important point. Because when we don't notice those leaks, we mistake being busy for being alive. We fill our hours, but they feel hollow. And then at the end of the day, we wonder why we're so tired and unfulfilled at the same time. But when we shift focus to energy, it changes the question completely. It's no longer how much time did I spend, but how fully was I there? That small change can make ordinary moments, even something simple like a meal or a conversation, feel fuller because we're actually present inside them.
Yes, and it makes me think, maybe reclaiming time isn't really about the clock at all. Maybe it's about noticing where we've been half awake in our own lives. Because if we're not careful, hours turn into days and days into years without that sense of fullness. But when we protect our energy, even small moments suddenly carry weight. It's like color returning to a faded picture. The picture was always there, but energy brings it alive again. And that's what makes time feel like it matters.
And that's such a powerful way to see it, because once we realize this, we stop chasing more hours and start asking better questions. Where is my attention right now? What gives me energy instead of draining it? And those questions are gentle but life-changing because they shift us from running after time to actually inhabiting it. That's where the real freedom begins, not in stretching minutes, but in making the ones we already have feel alive.
You know, when we talk about wasting time, it's easy to think it's just about discipline or focus. But if we look closer, so often it's really about emotion, fear, doubt, perfectionism. Those feelings are like invisible hands holding us back. I've noticed that sometimes I don't delay because I don't care, but because I care too much. I'm afraid of failing or of not doing something well enough. So I wait, I postpone it. And on the surface, it looks like procrastination. But underneath, it's fear, quietly running the clock.
That's so true, Ryan. And for me, one of the strongest feelings tied to delay is doubt. That little voice that says, "Are you sure you can do this? What if you're not ready yet?" That doubt can feel so heavy that starting becomes impossible. And then instead of facing it, we distract ourselves. We tidy the desk, scroll through our phones, or just sit there staring at the task we're avoiding. And what's painful is time keeps moving, even while we're stuck in that storm of doubt. It's like the clock is silent, but relentless.
Yeah. And perfectionism plays a huge role too. We tell ourselves we'll start once everything is perfectly in place, once we feel inspired, once the conditions are ideal, once we're ready. But that readiness never comes. It's like chasing a horizon. And while we wait for perfection, the imperfect hours, the real ones we actually had, quietly disappear. I think perfectionism tricks us into thinking delay is safer, when really it's just another way of losing time to fear.
And sometimes it's not fear or perfectionism at all. Sometimes it's loneliness. Those moments when we don't start something because, deep down, we don't want to face it alone. It's hard to admit, but that feeling of being by yourself with a big task or dream, it can be overwhelming. So instead of stepping into it, we step away into distractions that numb us. And yet, even in that avoidance, there's a quiet ache, because the longer we wait, the lonelier it feels.
That's such a powerful point, Priya, but it shows just how deeply our emotions guide the clock. We think delay is about poor planning, but really it's about carrying feelings we don't want to face. Fear, doubt, loneliness, they sit quietly in the background, but they steer so much of what we do or don't do. And if we're not careful, we spend more time fighting our emotions than actually living our lives. That's why understanding this part is so important. It's not just about managing minutes. It's about noticing what's really underneath them.
Yes, and maybe that's where the shift begins. Not by forcing ourselves to push harder, but by gently acknowledging what we're feeling. To sit with the fear, the doubt, the perfectionism, and say, "I see you, but you don't get to decide my whole day." That's such a tender human step, because once we name the emotions behind our delay, they lose some of their power, and suddenly the hours don't feel so heavy. They feel like something we can actually step into again with honesty and care.
You know, I think one of the hardest parts about wasted time is how much we mourn it.
We look back at the hours we've lost and carry them like a weight, but the truth is, no amount of regret can give them back. What we can do, though, is shift our focus to the hours that remain. Right now, at this moment, there's still time left. And that realization is powerful because it means the story isn't over. Even if half the day is gone, even if the week hasn't gone the way we hoped, we still have the chance to choose what happens next.
Yes, and I think that shift changes everything. Instead of punishing ourselves for what we didn't do, we can gently turn toward what's still possible. It doesn't have to be a grand gesture or a perfect plan. Sometimes it's just one small step. Making a call, writing a single page, going for a walk. Those little choices bring us back into the present, and suddenly, time feels like it belongs to us again. Because it's not about controlling every hour. It's about reclaiming even one moment and saying, this one is mine.
Exactly. And I think there's real hope in that, because when we think about time as all or nothing, we set ourselves up for disappointment. But when we see it as something we can touch, even in small pieces, it becomes manageable, even kind. You don't have to rewrite the whole day to feel better. You just have to choose differently right now. And that choice, however small, can shift the way the rest of the day unfolds. That's the quiet power we forget we have.
And maybe that's what makes reclaiming time so deeply human. It's not about perfect efficiency. It's about grace. Grace to begin again in the middle of the day. Grace to accept that wasted hours don't define us. When we carry that gentleness, the future feels lighter. Because instead of living in the shadow of what we've lost, we start to live in the glow of what we can still create. And even that one choice to see time with softer eyes makes it feel alive again.
And when you think about it, that's all we really get, the hours that are still in our hands. Yesterday is gone, tomorrow isn't promised, but right now is real. And when we choose to step into it, even quietly, we reclaim something bigger than time. We reclaim our lives. That's the gift hidden inside those wasted hours. They remind us of the value of what remains. And once we see that, every moment feels like an open door.
And maybe that's the question we're all left with. Not how much time have I lost, because that question only leads us backward. The real question is, what will I do with the time still in my hands? That question feels alive. It feels open. And it's one only you can answer. In the quiet, in the small choices, in the next breath you take.
So, as we come to the end of today's conversation, I just want to say thank you for being here with us. You gave us your time, and that means so much, because time really is the most precious thing we have. If there's one thought to carry with you, it's this. Every moment is a chance to choose differently. No matter how much time you feel you've lost, there's always something you can do with what's still in your hands.
Yes, thank you so much for spending this part of your day with us. We hope this episode reminded you that your hours matter and that even small choices can make them valuable. Try just for today to notice where your time is going and gently bring it back to what feels meaningful. That's where the change begins. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you in the next episode.